3 months early. That's how far ahead of schedule America's newest nuclear bomb finished its final certification this year. 360 kilotons. That's its maximum yield, 7 times the bomb it's replacing on the same shelf. Under 2 years. That's how long it took to go from announcement to a finished weapon, one of the fastest nuclear builds since the Cold War. 3 escalating numbers, and not one of them was the actual headline. At a plant in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, this bomb just passed the U.S. government's final inspection, and the analysts who track America's nuclear stockpile for a living weren't sure it needed to exist at all. You're going to get the timeline, the yield, the target, and the trade nobody explained. In the next 26 minutes, 4 layers, in that order. Here's the concept that explains everything about how this bomb got built this fast. 1 in, 1 out. Think about the last time you replaced something big in your house. A car, a furnace, a water heater. You didn't get to just add the new one to the driveway and keep the old one running next to it forever. Space, money, or the meter reader eventually forced a choice. New one in, old one gone. America's nuclear bomb stockpile runs on a version of that same rule, except the meter reader is arms control policy and a decades-old political ceiling on how many gravity bombs the country keeps. When a new bomb variant is designed, it doesn't get bolted on top of the old count. It replaces something. Here's how the process actually works, in 4 steps. Step 1. A design gets approved and built at plants like Pantex in Texas and Y-12 in Tennessee. Step 2. Every sealed radioactive core has to pass something called diamond stamping, a certification that the weapon meets War Reserve quality standards. Nothing enters the stockpile without that stamp, no matter how fast it was built. Step 3. Once a new variant is certified, an older variant with the same job gets marked for retirement. Step 4. The total count doesn't move. That's the frame you need for the next 20 minutes because the headline, "Finished 3 months early," sounds like a story about speed. It's actually a story about what got swapped out to make room. And the swap is the part nobody put in the press release. The Pentagon first announced this program, the B-6 1-13, in October 2023. That's according to the Department of Defense's own announcement, reported at the time by Breaking Defense. The National Nuclear Security Administration, NNSA, the agency that actually builds American nuclear weapons, finished the first complete unit by May 19, 2025. Under 2 years. For comparison, the bomb it's built alongside, the B-6 1-12, took the better part of 2 decades from first study to first production unit. NNSA calls this one of the most rapidly produced nuclear weapons since the Cold War ended. Then, this July at Y-12 in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, every sealed sub-assembly for the program passed final certification 3 months ahead of that already compressed schedule. 2 early finishes, back to back. That's the timeline. It's real, it's documented, and it's unusually fast. Here's the number underneath the timeline. The B-6 1-13's maximum yield is 360 kilotons. The B-6 1-12, the newer bomb it sits next to on the same production line, tops out at 50 kilotons. That's 7 times the explosive yield, confirmed by the Federation of American Scientists and multiple defense outlets covering the program. 360 kilotons isn't a new number for the B-61 family, though. It matches the B-6 1-7, an older variant that's been sitting in the stockpile for years, and is what the B-6 1-13 is actually replacing. So the yield jump only looks new if you forget the old bomb already existed. Nothing about American nuclear capability got bigger. A newer case just got built around an old number. Officials have said on the record what this bomb is for, hardened and deeply buried targets, underground command bunkers, hardened facilities, the kind of infrastructure China and Russia have been expanding for years. It's certified for exactly 2 delivery aircraft, the B-2 Spirit and the incoming B-21 Raider, both stealth bombers, both flown from continental U.S. bases. Unlike the B-6 1-12, it isn't being certified for NATO's dual-capable fighter jets or forward deployed to Allied air bases in Europe. This is a strategic bomber-only weapon built for one category of target and kept close to home. NNSA Administrator Brandon Williams called the July certification a clear indicator of discipline and operational focus. Energy Secretary Chris Wright tied the whole program to what he called President Trump's Peace Through Strength agenda. Acting Deputy Administrator David Hoagland called the accelerated production a remarkable achievement. NNSA says every one of its warhead modernization programs, 6 to 7 of them running at once, is currently on time or ahead of schedule. That's the agency's own claim about its own record, and it's worth saying so plainly because none of that paper trail explains why this particular bomb needed a 50-kiloton option replaced with a 360-kiloton one in the first place. If a government program finishing 3 months early sounds unusual, that's worth a like before we get to why. So here's the version of this story that Washington wants you to walk away with, and it's a genuinely coherent one. The world got more dangerous since the last time America seriously modernized its nuclear gravity bombs. China has been pouring concrete into new missile silo fields across its western deserts, over 100 new silos identified by outside researchers since 2021. Russia has spent years hardening its own command and control bunkers against exactly the kind of precision strike a B-6 1-12 is built for. A 50-kiloton weapon with pinpoint accuracy is excellent against a building. It is not reliably excellent against a facility buried under 200 feet of granite. That's the gap the Pentagon says the B-6 1-13 closes. Not more bombs. A bomb with more yield, available for the specific job a lower yield weapon can't guarantee to finish, cracking a hardened target in one strike instead of needing several, which matters when the target might not still be there for a second attempt. And the speed has a boring, defensible explanation. The B-6 1-13 isn't a new weapon built from scratch. It reuses the B-6 1-12's tail kit assembly, its guidance system, its safety and security architecture, all of it already tested, already certified, already sitting on the production line at Pantex. NNSA didn't invent a faster way to build nuclear weapons. It built one weapon almost entirely out of parts from another weapon it had already spent a decade perfecting. That's not corner cutting. That's the single most defensible reason a novel nuclear weapon could plausibly get certified in under 2 years without anyone credibly alleging a safety shortcut, and nobody has. Put that together and you get a clean, patriotic story. America identified a real gap against real adversaries, built the fix mostly out of parts it already trusted, and delivered it early through real bureaucratic discipline, deterrence modernized on schedule without expanding the arsenal by a single weapon. It's the kind of story that's easy to believe, because most of it is true. The timeline is real. The reused hardware is real. The target set is real. If the story stopped here, there'd be nothing left to investigate, and this would be a 3-minute video, not a 26-minute one. But there's a sentence sitting in the FAS report that the Pentagon's version has no room for. 2 of the analysts who track this stockpile for a living looked at the exact justification you just heard, and they didn't buy it. That's the strongest version of the official case. Comment which part convinced you most before the next part changes it. Here's the fact the closing the gap story leaves out. The gap wasn't actually open. The B-61-7, the older bomb the B-61-13 is retiring, already had a 360 kiloton option. It was already certified, already in the stockpile, already assigned to B-2 bombers, and capable of holding hardened targets at risk. The B-61-13 doesn't add a yield America didn't have. It repackages a yield America already had inside a bomb with the B-61-12's newer guidance and safety hardware. So the actual comparable number isn't 360 kilotons versus 50. It's 360 kilotons versus 360 kilotons. The new bomb against the old bomb it's replacing, same maximum yield, same target set, same delivery aircraft. Measured against what it's replacing, not what it's sitting next to on the shelf, the B-61-13 adds guidance system upgrades and a fresh production run. It does not add strategic capability the United States didn't already possess. That's exactly the gap Hans Christensen and Matt Korda flagged at the Federation of American Scientists in October 2023. In the sentence you heard at the start of this video, the military justification for adding the B-61-13 to the stockpile is hard to see, not because the target set is fake, because the target set was already covered. If the capability already existed, closing the gap against China and Russia can't be the reason a brand new production line got funded, staffed, and pushed through in under 2 years. Something else was driving the timeline, and that something else isn't in any Pentagon press release you'll find on this program. This is usually where a story like this gets interesting. Subscribe if you want to be here when it does. At Y-12, the diamond stamp isn't a metaphor. It's a physical tool pressed by hand into the surface of a sealed metal canister that a technician has spent months helping build and test. The stamp itself takes seconds. The work behind it doesn't. Every one of those canisters passes through the same fluorescent-lit inspection bay, the same logbook, the same second set of eyes checking the first set's work, because a mistake here doesn't get a recall notice. It gets a different kind of headline entirely. Somewhere in Oak Ridge this summer, someone clocked out on an ordinary Tuesday, having spent their shift certifying a weapon built to threaten an underground command bunker on the other side of the planet, then drove home past a grocery store, same as always. That's the actual scale of this. Not a press release, a shift. The strongest pushback to everything you just heard isn't "the government is lying." It's simpler than that. You're reading a policy analyst's opinion, as if it settles a military question it isn't qualified to settle. Christensen and Korda are respected trackers of the nuclear stockpile, but they're not the people responsible for actually holding a target at risk if deterrence fails. And there's a real answer to the capability already existed argument. Having a yield option inside an aging bomb design isn't the same as having it inside a bomb built on modern, tested guidance hardware with decades more service life ahead of it. The B-61-7 is old. Keeping an old design in the stockpile indefinitely carries its own risk. Parts age, certifications lapse, and eventually you're relying on a weapon nobody currently working at Pantex was around to originally build. Put yourself in the position of the planner actually responsible for the target list. You don't get to plan around "we technically still have an old bomb that can do this." You plan around what's certified, current, and reliably maintained for the next 20 or 30 years. From inside that job, swapping an aging 360 kiloton bomb for a new one built on proven, modern components isn't political theater. It's exactly the kind of unglamorous maintenance A responsible stockpile manager is supposed to do quietly, on schedule, without waiting for a crisis to force the issue. That's a fair point, worth conceding directly. Modernizing an old design onto new hardware is a legitimate reason to build something, even when the yield number doesn't change. The honest disagreement isn't over whether the B61-13 should exist eventually. It's over why this one got fast-tracked to the front of the line, ahead of other modernization work right now. So which is it? A real capability closing a real gap, or a bomb that didn't need to be new, built fast for reasons nobody wrote down? Here's how those two things actually fit together, and it's the rule worth carrying into the next story, like this one you see. A government program can be both technically defensible and politically convenient at the same time, and the press release will only ever tell you about the first half. The B61-13 modernizes an aging design onto proven hardware. That part is real, and the steelman for it holds up. But modernize an old bomb doesn't require a new name, a new production line, and a fast-track schedule ahead of 6 other modernization programs. Something had to make this specific swap worth jumping the queue for. And the piece the official version leaves out is what that something was: a separate, older bomb that had become a political problem, one this program happened to solve. Shorter version of the same rule: when a program moves faster than its own justification explains, look for what it's paying for somewhere else. Efficiency doesn't usually travel alone. It travels next to a trade. That's not a conspiracy theory. It's how appropriations and stockpile politics have worked for 70 years. Nothing gets retired without something replacing it, and nothing gets funded fast without someone upstream needing it funded fast. The B61-13 fits that pattern almost perfectly. What doesn't fit yet is the other half of the trade. The bomb this one was actually built to make politically possible to get rid of. Next time you see a program finish early, ask what it bought. Comment the last one you noticed doing that. Here's the trade. Sitting in the same stockpile as the B61-7 is a much older weapon called the B-83, a Cold War-era, megaton-class gravity bomb, by far the most powerful weapon the United States has in active service, dramatically more powerful than anything in the B-61 family, including the 360 kiloton B-61-13. For years, the government has wanted to retire it. It's old, it's expensive to maintain, and its yield is more than any realistic modern target requires. Congress said no. Specifically, hardliners in Congress resisted retiring the B-83 without something else in the stockpile that could still credibly threaten the hardest, most deeply buried targets, the exact job the B-83's enormous yield was built for. That's the wall the B-61-13 quietly solves. According to Christensen and Korda's own analysis, the B-61-13 functions as a political compromise. Give the hardliners a modern weapon that can still hold hard targets at risk, and the path to finally retiring the B-83 opens up. FAS analyst John Wolfsthal made the same connection back in 2023, suggesting the new bomb could be exactly what unlocks retiring the older, costlier one. That's the real reason this program got pushed to the front of the line, not because China and Russia forced a capability gap that didn't exist, because a completely separate, decades-old argument about a much bigger bomb needed a new bomb to end it. The B-61-13 wasn't built primarily to be more dangerous. It was built to make an old danger easier to finally let go of, and it had to move fast, because that argument had already been stuck for years. Not every source agrees on how central that trade actually was. The Pentagon's own public statements never mentioned the B-83 at all, only the hardened target mission. The B-83 connection comes entirely from outside analysts, reading between the lines of what Congress demanded and what the program actually delivered. That's a real disagreement worth naming, not papering over. Zoom out, and this isn't really a story about one bomb. It's a story about how nuclear modernization decisions get made in general, not in a single dramatic meeting where someone decides America needs more destructive power, but in years of smaller trades where an old weapons retirement gets tied to a new weapons approval, and the public explanation covers exactly one side of that trade. The B-61-13 will enter the active stockpile, having cost taxpayers a production run, a new certification process, and a compressed timeline to solve a problem that has almost nothing to do with the target set justification in the press release. That's not unique to this bomb. It's closer to how this system has worked for decades, and it will very likely be how the next modernization program works too. Here's a way to check whether this read is actually right, instead of just taking my word for it. If Christensen and Korda's trade theory holds up, the B-83 should get an official retirement announcement within the next couple of years, once B-61-13 moves to full-rate production. Watch for it by the end of 2028. If the B-83 is still sitting in the active stockpile with no retirement announcement by then, the trade this video just walked you through didn't play out the way the analysts expect, and that's worth coming back to. Which leaves one real question this video hasn't answered yet, and it's the one that actually matters. Does the B-61-13 make the United States safer, or did it just make a stalled political argument easier to finish? So safer, or just easier to finish? Both, depending on which question you're actually asking. This bomb doesn't hold anything at risk that the old one couldn't. But it does move that capability onto hardware that's actually built to last decades instead of quietly aging out. Efficiency and a trade, sitting inside the same weapon you just watched, get explained. That's the whole rule from earlier. In miniature, efficiency rarely moves alone. Here's what to actually watch, if you want to check whether that read holds up. If the trade this video described is real, the B-83 gets an official retirement announcement within the next couple of years, by the end of 2028. No announcement by then, and the theory doesn't hold up the way it looks tonight. I'll be checking. Subscribe if you want to be here when that gets graded. There's an older bomb sitting behind this entire decision, bigger, older, and the actual reason any of this moved fast. That's the one worth opening next. The B-83, the last megaton weapon left in the American arsenal, and the retirement fight nobody's finished yet. It's still sitting in Texas, still waiting on Washington to finish what it started.